Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Are you with me, Al?
I am with you now, D-Bays. Ready for another week of Mormon News Roundup?
I am excited to be here. I am thrilled to be here. Hey, we've got an absolutely action-packed week. I know that I said that last week as well, but it's just amazing how much Mormon news there is every single week. It never ceases to amaze me. So some of the things we're going to be talking about today is we'll examine the reopening of the refurbished Washington, D.C. temple. We're also going to take a look at the LDS Church's stance on the newly introduced gay rights legislation in Georgia and other places, the censoring of human anatomy PowerPoint slides at BYU Idaho, the passing of Senator Orrin Hatch, and much, much more. In fact, there was so much good news. We left at least 5 articles on the cutting room floor this week because we knew we would not be able to get to all of them within an hour. So we're giving you the best of the best, and we're excited about it.
Yeah, those the headlines just kept coming and coming all week long. It was insane.
Yeah, it is. So we are on Twitter. We're at News Mormon, and we also have a page. We're on Facebook. And Al, our website is live now, mormonnewsroundup.org, www.mormonnewsroundup.org. You can come check us out, and you can submit a news article. If you want us to review your news article, come on over to our website, submit it to us, and we'll definitely take a look at it. Now, if you submit us a news article on Patreon, I promise you that your odds will go up. But hey, we'll take anything we can get at this point. And we also have an email address, which is, and Al, I think you're going to like this. We have an official email. I haven't told you what it is, but it's kolob@mormonnewsroundup.org. Now, that's KOLOB that's mormonnewsroundup.org with 2 N's, mormonnewsroundup.org. Al, what is kolob, by the way, Al?
Well, kolob is going right to the top. Kolob is the governing planet from which God reigns, according to Mormonism.
So I figured, hey, if you're looking for more information, I figured you might have go straight to the top, right?
It is, yeah, and that's straight to the top. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Book of Abraham says that Kolob is either a star, but it also says it's kind of a planet. So it's tiny bit murky. Yeah. If you look at the middle of facsimile 2 in the in the Book of Abraham, reference numeral 1 represents Kolob according to Joseph Smith, and that was the kind of weird looking creature that's in the middle. That is Kolob as well. So that's why we use Kolob. It was first published in the Times and Seasons in 1842 because, and this is to quote here, quote, he saw the stars, that they were very great, and that one of them was nearest unto the throne of God. And the name of the great one is Kolob, because it is near unto me, for I am the Lord thy God. I have set these to govern all those which belong to the same order as that upon which thou standest. So this Kolob is supposed to govern all other planets. So I figured that'd be a good email address if you want to get in touch with us.
Easy to remember, sure.
Yeah, pardon me. I'm a little bit under the weather this week, but hopefully we can power through it. Now, a couple of small fact checks from last week. I went back and listened to the episode, and I accidentally called, speaking of the Heavenly Mother, where Heavenly Mother, we brought up that news article, and I accidentally misspoke, and I called Elder Runland Dave Runland, and it's actually Elder Dale Runland, not Dave Runland. So that was a mistake on my part, where he was calling me he said that any Latter-day Saints who were, help me out here, Al, what did he say?
Let's see.
Arrogant and unproductive.
Yeah, arrogant and unproductive to do any asking about Heavenly Mother.
Right, and I said it was Dave Runland, and that was my mistake. It's Dale Runland. And also, I wanted to say that last time I said I was a full-time employee of the church for 24 years. That's not quite correct. I was a part-time faculty member. I was a paid employee for almost 24 years, but most of that was a part-time as either an instructor or an adjunct faculty member. So I just wanted to clarify that for those folks out there. Okay. Now, at this time, we have 46 subscribers. But Al, I want to tell you, the strength of this podcast is not in the total number of subscribers. It is in the strength of the members. Does that sound familiar, by the way?
It does.
That's a little inside joke out there, because that seems to be a talking point of the church. And as the church's growth has declined as of late, as the total number of people have lessened over time, they always want to talk about, well, it's not in the total numbers anymore. Now it's in the strength of the members. And that was even brought out with Bishop Kaze. It's a talking point that you will hear more and more. And I think that that is true of the people listening to this podcast as well.
For sure.
So, a couple other last things here before we get to our first article. And that was following up on last week. We were talking about the Black Menaces. And refresh our listeners who the Black Menaces were, Al.
Okay, so the Black Menaces is a TikTok group of African American students at Brigham Young University that have taken this year to going to BYU campus and recording videos of asking some pretty tough questions to their white classmates and getting their responses. And the fact that so many of their white classmates seem to choke on their own tongues while trying to come up with an answer, and it really just exposes the cognitive dissonance that a modern person has to go through in order to be a member, or not a member, but a student at BYU.
Now they have we talked about last week how they were picked up by KUER, which is a local Utah-based media group, and I'm a big fan of KUER, by the way. Still like him, even though I don't live in Utah anymore. I think Doug Fabrizio is great. Not sure if he's still there, but I don't think you'll find a better interviewer on Mormon related items than Doug Fabrizio anywhere in the world. But they're also now not just being picked up locally. There's an article in the national NBC News. They're getting a lot more coverage. They're really going global. So that's just a follow-up week. And I also talked about we also talked about the Black Menaces and whether David Archuleta or the Black Menaces had more followers. So I went back and looked it up. So David Archuleta on his YouTube account has about 650,000 followers, and the Black Menaces have about 500,000 on their TikTok. And I'm just going to give you a last chance. I'm going to ask you, Al, who has more followers, David Archuleta, the Black Menaces, or President Russell M. Nelson?
Oh boy. I'm guessing that's going to be the Black Menaces.
Now, actually, President Nelson only has a quarter million followers on Twitter.
250,000. Wow.
But, I look at it as a win-win, because if he has a lot, no matter how many followers he has, it's a win-win. And let me tell you why. Because if he has a lot of followers, his message is really resonating with people. People are taking his message to heart. But if he doesn't have a lot of followers, well, hey, prophets were never supposed to be popular to begin with, right?
That's right.
So it's a win-win. Doesn't matter how many he has, it's a win-win. So I just wanted to see for my own curiosity who was the most popular. And it does look like David Archuleta is on top with 650,000 followers. And that's everything from last week. Did I forget anything?
Not that I can see. I think you covered it all. I think we've done our housekeeping for the week. So let's get into the news.
Okay. So our first article for the week is the Washington, D.C. temple. And it's reopened after 4 years of renovations. I mean, 4 years of renovations. This must have been a multi-million-dollar renovation that really must have been very, very expensive. I cannot recall any temple being shut down that long for that period of time, anywhere, anyway. Have you heard of that, Al?
I don't know if there's ever been a single temple that's been shut down for 4 years straight. Let's see, I would say maybe the Samoa temple, because it caught fire back in the 90s. Oh. But that was because it caught fire, and even then I'm not sure that it was closed down for 4 years. I don't think it was.
Right. So this is an unprecedented renovation. And I do live in the Washington, D.C. area. So I know this is near and dear to my heart, because I also served my LDS mission, believe it or not, out here in Washington, D.C. So in many respects, this is my temple going way back to the 90s. I have more on this temple than I do on any other temple. I remember being a Mormon missionary. And when I was stationed close enough to be able to get to the temple, which was only about half of the time, because some of my areas were just too far out to be able to get to the temple, I would go on my preparation day, which is my only day off, to go and visit the temple on those days. And that would be a significant effort because we didn't have cars that could go that far. So you would have to walk, then you would have to take a bus, then you'd have to get on the metro, then you'd have to transfer, then you'd have to take another bus. And then you would do your temple activities and come back, and your entire preparation day was basically gone. And this is on top of being a full-time missionary working 100 hours a week. So, I mean, sacrificing a preparation day, which is your only half day off, was a significant sacrifice, I would say.
Certainly.
The DC temple is 160,000 square feet. It's 7 stories tall, which is among the largest temples out there, and especially with the number of floors that it has. And especially the 7th floor is a really unique floor that most temples don't have. It has a large meeting space, very, very top floor, which very few temples have, to my knowledge. In fact, I'm not sure if any other temples, except for maybe Kirtland or Salt Lake City, has a big meeting space on the top.
But it seems like they put the big meeting rooms in the really older temples, but they never really. What I don't want to say they never really used them, but I just don't think that they saw the purpose in having them, since it was so rarely used. So they've left them out of the newer temples, and newer being, in the last half of the last century and going forward.
Yes. And there's 6 spires on the top. The three represent the Melchizedek priesthood, which is the higher priesthood. 3 represent the Aaronic priesthood, which is the lesser priesthood. And this was the first temple on the East Coast, built back in the 70s. So this is the first temple east of Mississippi after Nauvoo was burned to the ground.
Yeah.
Now, I remember as a missionary taking investigators to the visitor center there, because obviously an investigator, somebody who's interested in the church, is not allowed inside of an LDS temple, but you could take them to the visitor center. And I did that on a number of occasions. And what's interesting, Al, is that when I was a missionary, my sister was also a missionary in Washington, D.C. at the same time, because we were 2 years apart. She was 21, I was 19, and we both got called to Washington, D.C., and she spent quite a bit of time at the visitor center. So that was the only time that I could go and visit my sister, was when I had an investigator taking that investigator to the visitor center.
Wow. Now, right there, DVs, that's something that I've never heard of before. Not just, of course, I've heard of siblings serving a mission at the same time, but in the same mission, that's so unheard of. Wow. I didn't realize that ever happened.
Technically, one was called the Washington, D.C. North Mission. The other was called Washington, D.C. South Mission. But yeah, we were very close together. And I do remember I had one investigator. I'll just tell a quick funny story. This isn't a stories podcast. It's a news podcast. But I had one investigator that I took to the visitor center, and he was pretty wishy-washy. But then I came back to visit him again, and he goes, "Hey, I want to go back to the visitor center." And I said, "What reason?" He goes, "Well, I really like my sister." And I said, "Oh, well, his mom, this is the only chance I have to see my sister. So if I don't take you, then I'm not going to be able to see her." So I took him twice.
Oh, my goodness.
He didn't end up joining. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Now, a couple last things. Actually, I have a lot to say about this opening, so hopefully my listeners can get into this. But they did that. They've have the they open a temple when it's refurbished is open to the public. But first they have private tours before they open up the public tours. And what the private tours have revealed is that in the Washington, D.C. temple, there used to be a mural called the Final Judgment Mural. And it was a mural of Jesus in clouds and great glory. And on his right-hand side, with his hand pointed up, was a bunch of people who were happy, were glowing, were thankful, and were apparently going to be exalted. On his left, with his hand pointed down, with his palm facing down, basically, was a group of people who were darkened, who were sad, who were somewhat on their way to flames and final judgment, basically. They were the damned. And what these private tours have pointed out is that it appears that they removed the Final Judgment mural. Al, why do you think that they might have removed the Final Judgment mural for these private tours in the temple?
Well, let's see. This mural, it sounds familiar to me. I'm guessing that there's other pictures of this mural elsewhere, right?
Yes.
So you can find this. I mean, it's a pretty common picture amongst Mormondom, where there is a big, bright Jesus right in the middle, and then the on his right hand side, everything's happy and sweet and all lit up, and on his left is everything darkened and chaos and disorder and destruction. So I'm thinking that they removed it probably because you know what, I don't know. I would have a theory that, well, the church is trying to portray itself as being less racist, but I don't recall all the people being of darker skin color on the left hand side in that
if they
picture.
were of darker skin color, but when you're giving the private tours to generally non-members,
yeah,
that can give an uneasy feeling to people if they're on a private tour and they see.
This is our opinion of non-members.
Yeah, if you don't,
that would be it.
It could be a very uneasy feeling for people. So it appears that mural has been taken down. My only question is after it is dedicated and closed, will the mural go back up? That's the real question.
Yes, it is.
So I do want to talk about my final day of my mission, or the final last couple of days. You're allowed to go back to the temple. I spent 2 years for the church on my mission. It was a very challenging mission. And I do remember going through the temple. You're allowed to go to the temple one last time. And I remember in one of the final ceremonies that I really wanted to pray to God and ask him, God, how did I do on my mission? Did I do a good job? Did I find everyone who I needed to find? Was I able to find your sheep? And I remember a distinct impression in my mind that said, quote, your sacrifice is acceptable to me, end quote. And it was a very powerful experience for me, and it still is a powerful experience to this day. So I have a lot of great history with the Washington, D.C. temple. Now, as the temple has been closed, my family has been going to the Philadelphia temple, which is a long way away. It's almost 3 hours away.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the reopening of the temple, I was a member of the Mormon Choir of Washington, and the Mormon Choir of Washington is going to sing at the rededication of the Washington, D.C. temple. And I thought to myself, even though I don't go to church as much as I used to, and I guess you could say that I've struggled with that with my testimony, I thought, can I still be a member of the Mormon Choir of Washington? With somebody who is maybe not 100% on board with absolutely everything. Can I still do it? And I thought, well, if we're singing Jingle Bells, or I don't know, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that doesn't seem to be a bit of that doesn't seem to be a problem. Sure, I can do it, and I can sing for the rededication. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But I look more back at my life, and when you're part of the Mormon Choir of Washington, you're really an ambassador for the church.
Yeah.
So we also sing spiritual hymns. And I guess what did it for me is, I looked at lattergaystories.org. That's I don't know if you've been on that site, Al, but they have a lot of very interesting stories about how Latter-day Saint members of the church, they were in meetings where other people were feeling the spirit and were testifying the truthfulness of the church. And they looked inwardly in themselves and said, what is wrong with me? Why am I so broken? How are all of these other people feeling the spirit and living a good life, and I'm broken, I'm wrong, I'm demonic? And I thought, if I'm singing for this opening ceremony for the Washington, D.C. temple, being an ambassador for the church, I'm giving an implicit endorsement to the church's teachings, which they're not all benign. So if that person who goes to that reopening of the temple, that kid, that 12-year-old boy who is questioning his sexuality and is coming to realize that he's gay, and I'm singing, and he goes and commits suicide later on, heaven forbid, what percent am I responsible for that? Is it 0.0001%, or is it 0.000001%? I don't know how much it is, but I don't want to be responsible for that, even in the smallest degree.
Yeah.
So I guess
either of those is too high. Yeah.
That's why I decided that I'm not going to continue with the Mormon Choir of Washington. So while they're doing the private tours, the governor of Maryland went through, and I'm a big fan of Larry Hogan. They're doing all these tours for all the ambassadors throughout the world. I mean, we're talking, remember, all the embassies throughout the whole world are in Washington, D.C.
That's right.
So This hasn't been open in 50 years. So all of these big time ambassadors are coming through. This is getting national news coverage all the way across the world, from China to Israel to Great Britain, all over the world. This is big time news. Now, the public, pardon me.
All right.
The public tours are going to be starting very, very soon. Now, why do you think, by the way, that this temple reopening has had so much press coverage, Al?
Well, I mean, you are in the nation's capital there, and this is a very iconic landmark. People drive past this thing every day. It's got a worldwide reputation for being the bleached Emerald City. I mean, it looks just like the Emerald City, rising up over the Beltway there. As you come around the corner, there's the bridge that perpetually has that graffiti that says "Surrender Dorothy" painted on it. Every time they clean it up, somebody comes. I mean, there's some dedicated people out there to making sure that spray paint graffiti is just as much of an iconic landmark as the temple itself. So, I mean, I can see why this is a huge deal for people around the world, because they are familiar with it, and they haven't been allowed to go inside. It's very mysterious, very secretive. And, I understand the secret versus sacred, but the fact that people can't go in and can't see what's inside of it until now, that's what makes it secret. I mean, I understand that the temple is very sacred to the LDS Church, and that it's a very special place. But it's also been a place that's been kept secret. It's been a place where people haven't been allowed to go see until they're approved worthy as as the leaders of the church say so. But so now for them to have an open house, this is really a chance of a lifetime deal. I don't know when you would get your next opportunity to go through and tour this huge building that's been on everybody's mind, or at least a part of everybody's daily commute for so long. And now now they get a chance to see what's inside, but they haven't been able to do that before.
Yes, that is correct. And that brings us to our first news article, which is Inside the Latter-day Saints Washington, D.C. Temple, published on April 17th, 2022 by CBS News. And I agree with what you said 100%. Now, also, remember, there's more press in Washington, D.C. than there is anywhere else in the United States.
True.
So the press, they need news articles. And with Donald Trump out of office, these guys, they need something to do. And that's honestly, I really do think that this is getting more coverage now than it would have during the last presidency, because there has been a dearth of regular news. I think because Joe Biden's presidency has been very scandal free.
Well, yeah, Democrats are boring.
That is the case. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Governor Larry Hogan, who went and toured the temple. He's a very, very conservative Democrat, so perhaps that tells you where my political leanings are. So I do want to talk about Elder Bednar, and also Elder Christofferson were there to take the press through for the comments, which that doesn't always happen with every temple. Right? No, it does not. Special. Yeah, they sent 2 apostles. The church sent 2 apostles for this reopening. I mean, that's unprecedented. I can't remember a time for a refurbishment that you're going to see that kind of high-level coverage. The church knows that this is a high-interest, high-value asset.
Yeah.
So some of the things that Elder Bednar says, I would like to speak to. And that's, first of all, we all know that the Lord's University is BYU. Go Cougars, right? Are you with me, Al?
Yep. I'm as far as I was taught.
That's right. But we can also say that the Lord's University is the temple. So I've taught in higher education for many years. And just like Elder Holland said in his famous BBC interview, I've read a few books and I'm no dodo. Yeah. So now the thing about being in the temple is that there's no way to really ask or receive answers to difficult questions. It's basically a one-way conduit of information. It would be different if once you made it into the celestial room or through other ceremonies that you had the temple president or a senior member of the church who was at the top that you could have a dialogue with and get answers to difficult gospel topic questions. But there is no place for that. So once I had memorized every ceremony in the temple, there was nothing much more for me to learn. And I know that sounds callous, And some members of the church say they learn something every single time that they go, something new every time they go to the temple. I'm afraid that I was not one of those, because once you had something that was completely memorized, I found no further learning that was able to take place.
Mm-hmm.
So in higher education, again, I've taught in higher education for many years. One-way conduits of information rarely lead to really good educational outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, Elder Bednar said that we make now, when he was going through with the press, they had asked him a few questions, and they say, well, what takes place in the temple? He says, well, we make promises to God. But Al, and this is where I want to get very controversial here, and you need to tell me if I'm doing this wrong.
Okay.
Because I've given a lot of thought to this. But when you're in the temple, do you actually make promises to God? Because if you go through the ceremonies themselves, what you actually promise is, you say, quote, I promise before God, angels, and these witnesses, end quote. Or you say, quote, in the presence of God, quote, I promise to do X, Y, Z. So you're not making a promise to God, but you're making a promise before God.
Yeah, that's a very interesting distinction, and I would challenge anybody to say otherwise, because I mean that's exactly how it goes. I mean it's maybe considered a minor distinction, but I think it's a very important distinction as well. That you're making these promises before God, but are you making these promises to God, or are you making them to His representative church? And I think that the answer is you're promising to the church before God.
I agree, and that's what I thought about a lot this week. You're promising to the church in the temple before God, angels, and these witnesses. You're actually not making any covenants to God at all. So, I would like to take issue with what Elder Bednar said, and this is another reason that was an opportunity for you to ask questions in the temple to get answers to these questions. Maybe we could have these distinctions cleared up. But there is no such place for that. They also asked Elder Bednar in the CBS News article, what about the secret and sacred? What things are you keeping secret in the temples? Which is a natural question to have.
Sure.
And the internet and YouTube were not around when I first went to the temple in the 1990s.
Yeah.
So things in the temple are actually not secret anymore. They just aren't. You can go onto YouTube now and see every single ceremony in the temple in full detail. So when Elder Bednar says that what goes on in the temple is sacred and not secret, he's 100% correct now.
Yeah, he is.
Because there's no more secrets.
Yep. Prior to the internet, he would have been wrong. But in this day and age, yeah, you're right. It's not secret if it can be found, if it can be known.
Yes, it can be. So I am looking forward to, I was debating, I said, do I want to go back to tour the temple during the open house? I've come absolutely want to go through the temple again during the open house. Why would I ever not want to? That makes no sense in my own mind. I have a lot of memories on this, and I want to go through the Washington, D.C. temple again. I don't know if I ever will after the tour, but I definitely want to go back there and see if any other memories still come to mind. And I also want to check for myself to see if that mural is still up there. So
yeah, for sure.
I guess I've got something to look forward to.
Well, and I think anybody that can really ought to make the effort. This is a chance of a lifetime event, especially anybody who is not LDS. This temple is by far the most important temple east of the Mississippi River. It was the first one to go up in the last century, outside of Utah. But I mean, it's really significant for the role that it plays in the church.
Yes, it is. Okay, I'm sorry we took so much time with that, but I thought it was important.
It was important. I'm glad we took the time with it.
Great. Our next article is Latter-day Saint leader joins open letter to Georgia. LGBTQ religious rights don't have to conflict. And this was published by the Deseret News. So a Latter-day Saint leader announced support on Tuesday for legislation in Georgia that would protect LGBTQ people from discrimination while also protecting religious rights. And this was signed by the Area 70 in Georgia, Elder M. Galt IV. The church senior leadership has supported similar fairness for all legislation. And I thought, man, after I read through this article, I thought, you know what? I've been too hard on the church for these LGBTQ issues. I didn't realize that the article points out that they've supported other legislation in Arizona and in other places. And the article said no one should be denied protections based on their sexual orientation or gender. We believe that all children are from a loving God, and we're also Americans with a long tradition of figuring out how to get along despite differences. And this is signed by a number of different entities, from the Black lesbians to PFLAG to you name it. It's signed by just about everybody.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what? Maybe I have not been staying up very well on the news when it comes to actual legislation that the church has backed, because this seems to indicate that the church is doing really much more than I thought that they were doing until you dig deeper. So that's the problem here. So you got to realize your news source, and this is the Deseret News.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Fairness for All legislation, which is what the church on the national level has supported. So the Fairness for All legislation was actually brought into Congress by one of the Utah representatives who's a Mormon.
Really?
So if you look at what people have said about that, I have another article that says if the Fairness for All legislation were enacted, the bill would undermine civil rights protections for women, people of color, people of faith, and create substandard protections for LGBTQ people. And this is signed by everybody and their dog, PFLAG, Transgender Law Center, NAACP. It says the Fairness for All Act is anything but fair, and it does not serve all of us. It is an affront to existing civil rights protections that protect people on the basis of race, sex, and religion, and creates substandard protections for LGBTQ people with massive loopholes and carve-outs, and upends critical federal programs that support that serve children in need. The legislation is dangerous for many reasons, and would roll back already existing protections for LGBTQ peoples and women. So it seems like, and this is signed on by a lot of people. So the Fairness for All legislation that the church seems to be in favor of, I know this may come as a big shock to you, Al, but it's not really a Fairness for All piece of legislation.
Well, I must admit my eyebrow was raised when I heard about this, especially for as positive as it was, which I thought, well, maybe the church is actually making concession to the LGBTQ community, and saying, okay, well, if you're not going away and we're not going away, then we at least need to be able to live in this world together. So you get to do whatever you want to do. We get to do whatever we want to do. And that's fair for everybody. That was my way of giving the church a benefit of the doubt. But it sounds like if we actually read the wording of this bill, that's not what it's saying.
No, I think what this comes down to is that the church, and especially Elder Oaks, I think that they have a deep fear that now that gay marriage has been legalized, that the U.S. government will eventually force churches to have gay marriages, and that would force the church to be able to have gay marriages in temples.
Yeah.
And a lot of this legislation always has carve-outs for religious exemptions. And that's what the church really wants to make sure that they uphold and say, hey, they don't want to get lawsuits by, and we're going to be covering this in the rest of our articles, from transgender persons in the church who sue the church and say, my rights were, I was disenfranchised by the church, or I was not allowed to marry in the church. The church wants to have legal carve-outs for those things that say, hey, we can't be sued for these things. So the legislation that they're proposing, the Fairness for All legislation and the rest of these, they on the surface can seem like they're protecting LGBTQ people, but the church has itself in mind much more than it has LGBTQ people.
Yeah. It has every step of the way up until now. So I'm not terribly surprised to see that they still are doing the same thing with this legislation.
Now, do you remember the historic Utah compromise? Remember the Utah passed the historic anti-discrimination and religious rights compromise a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I do. It was very similar to this.
It was similar. And when you look at what the LGBTQ community basically said about that, as I was doing the research, it said, hey, it is barely better than nothing, but it's much less than what we needed. And based on the fact that it was Utah, that's as far as we could possibly go.
Yeah, it was. It was a hopeless situation. I remember when that came out. It was, oh my goodness. I mean, the church kind of threw itself a birthday party and gave itself tons of presents there, and then gave the LGBTQ community a cupcake and said, "There you go. We've been fair." Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people are saying. And I was fully prepared after reading this Deseret News article to give the church a lot of props. But as soon as you went underneath the surface, there's no other non-church related news articles that are not coming out of KSL or the Deseret News that are saying that this is a win for the LGBTQ community.
No,
all the rest
they're saying the opposite.
They are saying not only they're saying exactly the opposite thing. So still got a long way to go here, but that brings us to our next article, and we always include a few BYU articles in here because hey, that's the church's kingdom. So our next article, and it's not really an article, but it's on Twitter, and we have the link in the show notes. It was posted by Christine A. And I did a lot of research on this to, first of all, confirm that this was a real article and a real thing. And this was published on this tweet was put out on April 19th, 2022 by @_Christine_A. And it says, in today's edition of WTF at BYU Idaho anatomy class, put censor bubbles because of porn, I guess, the organs, the nervous systems, and vein diagrams. I don't censor these for my kids of any age. I just can't, you guys. And if you look, can you describe these pictures for us, Al?
I certainly can. Okay, so what you have is a medical textbook that has a female body and a male body next to each other. And the female body is, let's see, it shows you basically the vascularity runs underneath the skin, but it still shows you the skin overlaying on top. It's just kind of one of those transparent things, right? In all the bodies except for over the breasts, you have a couple of blots that have, blocked out the breasts. And then over the groin area, you have another blot that blocks it out. Same thing over on the male, except for on the male, it's just over the groin area. It's a big, blot. So I guess if you're a BYU Idaho student that's trying to figure out the femoral arteries, good luck.
Having been a college professor myself for a number of years, I can tell you that what one college professor puts into his or her class does not necessarily reflect on the entire university. Let's just put that out right out.
All right. That's fair.
But where do you think that this is coming from? How in our modern day and age can a college professor even think to do something like this? In fact, in her tweet, she says, it's ridiculous that in my human anatomy class, they're censoring human parts of the body or censoring parts of the body. It seems a bit ridiculous to me, seeing as if we are literally studying those specific parts.
Precisely. I mean, you can't, it's, how are you supposed to study the sex organs without being able to see the sex organs? Just in the name of, well, we don't want to have any pornography. Well, I mean, the definition of pornography would be that it's designed to titillate or arouse. But this is very academic. It's not designed to titillate or arouse. Whether a kid's going to be able to be aroused by looking at it because it's something foreign to them, something new to them. And that's kind of the purpose of these college courses, is to inundate people with so much genitalia that it no longer becomes arousing to see. It just becomes, well, this is part of what I'm going to be doing. As a doctor, I'm going to be dealing with people's genitalia.
So, I mean, is this sexualizing something that is literally non-sexual?
No, I think what this is what it might actually be doing unintentionally is sexualizing something that's not sexual.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, she tweeted, for those who are asking, yes, literally every picture of the human body is censored. He said today it's because there are freshmen in this class and they aren't ready to see these things until they're older, until they're further along in their major.
Really? If they're college, and this is the major that they're going to go into, it seems like they ought to at least get used to the fact that everybody has a body and everybody's got some sort of genitalia, unless they're an anomaly. But
I mean, this is really, I brought this up for this week because this is literally making the rounds all over the place. It is being,
oh yeah,
it's being
I've seen
memed
it
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody's making memes of this. They're mocking BYU Idaho. Do you think this stems from the famous BYU Idaho purity culture that I've heard legends told? I never went there myself. You're somewhat closer to there. Is this from the BYU Idaho purity culture?
You know, you and I both went to BYU, and it seems like I don't know how aware you are of the BYU Idaho culture, but it seems like BYU Idaho is a far more Handmaid's Tale than BYU. It's, they go to extremes up there. They're a little bit more conservative, a little bit more retrenched with their whole approach to everything. So, yeah, I mean, whereas BYU would say no pornography, BYU Idaho will say nothing that can even be construed as pornography. So let's get rid of the human body in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they say the BYU Idaho is kind of like the Saudi Arabia of Mormonism.
Yeah.
You know, it's where everything is taken to the extreme. And people are tweeting back and they're saying, well, my fifth graders elementary school has more confidence in their students than BYU Idaho has in theirs. And they're showing their fifth grade homework. And it's just, you know, normal human anatomy stuff.
Well, yeah, we all went through maturation at, you know, the fifth grade or sixth grade levels, and, you know, saw what each other was packing with at that time. So, I mean, if you can trust or fifth graders and sixth graders, you know, kids are 9, 10 years old. What's your problem with freshmen in college not being old enough to handle this yet? And when will they be?
These freshmen in college are old enough to be married as well.
Yeah.
And some of them already are.
Yeah.
So I just hope that they keep their eyes closed, I guess, at all times when they're with their spouse. I mean, the level of ridiculousness here is really reaching new bounds. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess just the old college professor in me just comes along on this one and says, boy, you hope that this isn't true. But, you know, I went back and looked through the history of this thing, and it really looks like this is a real thing because a lot of other people are tweeting on it. And whether it is true or not, it is now memeable, and it is news in and of itself. I believe it is true, but...
well, there's certainly been plenty of other stories that stem from BYU Idaho that are similar.
So this isn't the first time we've come across something like that.
No, and it won't be the last.
And with today's society on Netflix, where you can just be watching a regular show and all of a sudden there's some nudity on there when you didn't realize that it was going to be there, all care how cloistered it is that you are, all of these students have come across probably much more open, you know, sexualized things than just than people on their vascular glands laid out on a tape.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we're not talking about, you know, 1950s Provo here. We're talking, this is 2022. So get with the picture.
Yeah.
Hey, why don't you go? We're going to stay on BYU, and why don't you take us to this next article that you have out on BYU?
Let's see. Are we talking about the young lady that was a BYU student that was on The Real World?
Yes, The Real World's Julie Stauffer. Hence that homecoming.
Yeah. Now, I think you and I probably overlapped at our time at BYU. She was there at the time that I was there. And you were you there at the same time?
You know, I don't know the exact dates, but
this was back in season 1 of their Real World New Orleans. So this is the year 2000.
But let me tell you, I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree, and then I taught there for a long time. So I was probably there. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Well, if you were there in 2000, this is when it happened. Okay. So this is from U.S. Weekly, you know, national magazine, from April 20th, 2022, from Eliza Thompson. The title was The Real World's Julie Stauffer hints that Homecoming, which is the follow-up to the original Real World, they're basically doing a reunion of the previous seasons. They're bringing everybody back. It's been about 20 years since, so they're just saying, hey, you know, what's happened with everybody. So Julie Stauffer will explain the complex reason she left Mormonism during this season. So she, at the time, it was a very controversial thing. She was a BYU student from Wisconsin that decided that she was going to go and live with in a house with all these people from all different walks of life. And she had I remember at the time that at BYU, the people that had watched it said, she just makes herself look like such a dork for going on there like, oh, well, BYU would never allow this. I could never do that at BYU. And, that seemed to be the nature of it. I myself didn't watch it. So I'm aware of it, but I didn't, I'm not familiar, but even so, now she's going back to it, and she did get kicked out of BYU for it because she broke the honor code. She signed the honor code that said she wouldn't live with roommates that are not of the same gender as she. So that was the grounds that she got expelled for, and that's fair. She did sign the honor code just like the rest of us did. So.
Well, let me jump in there and ask you though, Al. Usually that is not necessarily enforced when you are not in school. So if it is, say, in the summertime and you're not attending school, a lot of times that is not enforced.
Yeah, and it can get a little gray area there, especially in the summertime, because you have a lot of college students that go away to different camps or different places, and they work at like a resort or something. As part of that, they have their quarters. Let's say that they go work on a cruise ship, and the quarters are integrated. They're co-ed. So you've got boys and girls living together, and is that a reason to expel somebody? Because all they're doing is just trying to earn some money so they can pay their tuition.
Or in the summertime, if you didn't follow the grooming standards for males, for instance, who are supposed to keep clean shaven and not have their hair too long. Most times in the summertime, if you had your beard grown out a little bit, nobody, to my knowledge, has ever been expelled for something like that over the summer.
That's true. In fact, at the time that I went to BYU, I didn't keep the honor code that strictly. I shaved every 3 days, and I got away just fine. Nobody ever approached me and said, "Do you have a beard card?" Although I probably should have been called up for it because sometimes that beard got a little thick. But
right.
Yeah, even so, the honor code wasn't all that strictly enforced, but it seems like it's being even more strictly enforced now. So
yes. So the interesting thing about this article is that the advertisement for this MTV particular setting was MTV purchased this on the front page of the I'm sorry, what is BYU's newspaper?
Oh, the Daily Universe. Yeah.
Yes, it was on the front page of the Daily Universe. That was the call for entrance because the director said we wanted a strict Mormon on this broadcast so that we could show a big contrast and get viewership.
Yeah, and it worked. It was great entertainment.
Yeah, it was. The question is, why would the church want to run something on the front page of it? And the church would think, well, this is going to be great publicity for the church because you're going to see this wholesome, wonderful, believing, devout Mormon who's going to be contrasting all these heathens. And people are going to say, hey, I want the Mormon lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the approach that they were trying to go with, but it seemed like it backfired.
Yeah. And then somehow in the middle of it, they changed their mind.
Yeah. Like I said, with the backfiring, it just... and I'm going to be curious to find out what her reasons are, because this is something that's a little interesting. We have a lot of people that have tried to get their story out to try to explain their reasons for leaving the church. And I don't know that any of them have ever gotten this kind of a platform. That maybe there's been a few over the years that have been able to go on some sort of nationwide television and give their story. But that's the part that really intrigues me, is finding out what her complex reason for leaving Mormonism is. She alludes to it somewhat in the article, saying that, she did a lot of research and study and stuff. But I'm really curious to see what her path was that led her out of Mormonism.
That's a really interesting point, because she said that basically her values did not align with the church, especially when it came to racism, LGBTQ, and other things. Basically, her value, she didn't discover, something in church history that bothered her or anything like that. She said it was a value change that really bothered her. So, but
Yeah.
you brought up a good point that I was just thinking of. No ex-Mormon has been given such a large platform as she's about to be given to tell her ex-Mormon story.
Yeah.
That I'm aware of in history. So she was brought onto the MTV Real World. By the way, MTV is blocked on BYU campus. If you're in the dorms or anything, BYU does not allow MTV at all.
That's right.
So when she comes back on, she was brought on specifically that because she was a Mormon. Now they're going to be definitely asking her a lot about it. It's not just like she was some run-of-the-mill, I don't know, I don't want to sound too cavalier, but some run-of-the-mill Christian who was wishy-washy. She was devout. She was the whole reason that they brought her on. So they're naturally going to be asking her questions in this reunion. And people are going to hear her talk about her experience with the church and leaving it in a way that has had more coverage than perhaps any other person.
Yeah, for sure.
That's very interesting. I can't wait to hear. Wait to hear how they cross this one.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that too.
Okay, thanks for bringing this article up. I have another article that's from. It's called "New Children of Record and Church Activity," and this was published on zelfofetusdaughter.com. I know it's kind of an obscure website here, but it's published on 18 April 2022. And they track the church's history for the last 10 years of yearly new children of record. So the church for quite a few years was hovering around the 120,000 children of record. That is, children of record is basically, if you're baptized as a member of the church, then you're a child of record. If you are blessed also, you become a child of record.
Yeah, so this is anybody that would be comparable to what the church what other churches would consider christening. This is the LDS churches, giving them a name and a blessing right after they're born.
Right. And what they're talking about is the yearly new children of record has been flat for several years. It started falling in 2015. And the pandemic, it went down quite a bit. But what you would expect to see is, yes, during the pandemic, people were not getting their children blessed.
Yeah.
But then as soon as the pandemic abated and the church started reopening all their chapels, you should have seen a huge backlog of people who were just waiting. Should have seen a huge spike.
Yeah, should have seen dozens. I mean, actually, they should have had kids that were walking and talking up there getting names and blessings, like 10 on a fast Sunday,
Right. Yeah, you should have seen a lot. But what they said is they did not even rebound to the earlier previous level.
Really?
And what this article basically, let me quote from the article. The backlog probably isn't entirely clear. There are members who are older or immunocompromised, who are probably waiting for COVID to be more resolved.
Sure.
Basically return to church. But they basically said, I do wonder, though, how big the group really is. As people who appear to be returning slowly might end up revealing that they're people who aren't coming back. And that's basically what the summary of the article says, is that with these numbers of the lack of children of record, basically the people who stopped going to church during COVID, quite a bit of them decided, you know what, after COVID, I'm not coming back at all. And that could be a larger amount of people than anyone has previously thought.
Yeah. That's really interesting news.
Yeah, because you would expect to see a big spike, as 2021 should have seen 200,000 children of, should have seen a children record, should have seen 2,000 to prepare for the backlog. But
for sure.
You didn't even get back to the previous level. That means that all of those people who stopped going during the pandemic, a lot of them have decided not to go back to church at all. I just thought that was an interesting article.
Yeah, and it's going to be even more interesting to watch that one or follow it as we get further and further down the other side of this hill from the pandemic. So, every week there should be more and more people starting to return if it was just because of the pandemic. But if we keep going week after week and there's not more and more people returning, then it's obviously got to be something else.
Right. And this also goes into that the new children of record are a function of two things: birth and adoption. So maybe the church during the pandemic, they didn't adopt as much. That could be a possibility as well.
Yeah.
But basically, the activity rate has fallen dramatically and probably permanently.
Yeah.
And that's not good news for the church. I'll just put it that way.
And that's one of the other theories, is that people got a little bit of space in between them and the church, and a little bit of breathing room to really think about some things, and without having the church dominate your week, it gives you a little bit of time to think about this and do some real navel pondering and figure out where you stand. So.
Yeah, some people realize that, if they didn't go to church on Sunday, that the world still turned on its axis, and they could still, that they weren't missing it as much as they originally had thought that they might.
Yeah, and some people just enjoyed having another day in their weekend.
Yeah. How about that Mormon Leaks article? Can you tell us about that one now?
I really like this Mormon Leaks article. The Salt Lake Tribune, they have a podcast that they've put out called Mormon Land, where one of their editors, and along with Peggy Fletcher-Stack, she co-hosts it. This one's from April 20th, 2022. They for their Mormon Land, they do an article that they'll publish, but then they also have their podcast, so you can listen to the interview that they do with Mormon WikiLeaks founders Ryan McKnight and Ethan Gregory Dodge. So these guys, just like WikiLeaks, they tried to branch off in doing the religious WikiLeaks, where their whole purpose, as stated, is they just want some transparency from religions. They want the churches to be honest about what their finances are. They want the churches to be honest about what their policies are, and what they just own their responsibilities. And these guys, they've been really interesting to follow. They've fallen off a little bit over the years. Of course, they've had lawsuits of all kinds against them for divulging stuff. These are the ones that without these guys, we still would have no idea how much the living stipend that the apostles and general authorities get. These are the guys that a lot of the whistleblowers go to them in order to get the information about the church out there. So they've been demonized by the church, of course, as being anti-Mormon and for being having an axe to grind against the church. Maybe they do have a bit of an axe to grind, but I really herald these guys as being just transparent, just be open, just be honest, because all that they're doing is just saying, well, it's been released that, it's the second counselor in the first presidency,
Elder Eyring.
It was his pay stub from 2012, I think it was, that they released, showed that he was making over $100,000 a year. Yeah,
I believe that pay stub was from earlier, by the way, but yes.
Right.
They also released they released the official memo that showed that the living stipend was increased from 120 to 140,000, and that was back in, I believe, 2014.
Yeah.
And we know now also that all the general authorities, the 70s and the apostles, they all earn the same amount of pay, which I thought was interesting. I also did a little bit of research about how these guys got started, and it all started with someone had recorded the video of the general authorities have weekly meetings that take place in the church office building. Somebody found or obtained a copy of some of these meetings, which consisted of Elder Gong, who at the time was a member of the 70, but now is an apostle, briefing the general authorities on a number of mostly secular subjects. And that person wanted to release those videos, but did not know a way to do so that would maintain confidentiality and keep his anonymity. And that's basically how Mormon Leaks got started, is they said, we will house the video and we will take the heat for these videos. Because if you just release that onto YouTube, the church could sue you, and the church could find your IP address, and the church could come after you. And this person did not want to have to deal with that and having the church know their identity either.
Yeah.
Those leaked videos are very, very interesting because they go through a wide variety of subjects. And you see the apostles who are in these meetings, and they look very, very similar to just what normal executive level businessmen would be going through. Mm-hmm. Hey, these are the issues that are happening in the world today. These are the problems. This could affect the church. This could not affect the church. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very, very typical business type meeting that would take place. So that's how these guys got their genesis. And I'm very sad to see them leave. Unfortunately, Mormon Leaks didn't really, which turned into the Truth and Transparency organization, it didn't really catch on. And that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate because people like these, I consider this to be true journalism, that these are the guys that are actually doing the work of bringing out what's really going on.
Yeah. And people say, well, it's despicable because you don't put your name behind it. But a lot of people who have brought things to light that don't bring the church into a favorable light, like the Tanners or others, they get sued by the church. Church has a lot of resources, and they can put a hurt on a lot of these people who are bringing forth things that the church doesn't like. Yeah. And people just don't want to take that kind of heat. You need an organization that can maintain confidentiality. And what the secret of confidentiality is, of course, is that the Mormon Leaks website, it can't track who has submitted the articles to begin with. So let's say that they get sued. Let's say that the church were to sue Mormon Leaks. Well, Mormon Leaks can't give up the name of the person who supplied the confidential materials.
Yeah, because they don't have it.
Because they don't have it. So you need to have a computer or internet infrastructure in place for that kind of thing. So it has to be structured properly. And these guys, they talked about in the podcast that I listened to how at the beginning they did not have that, but eventually that they did have that. So it's just fascinating. And their work, all I can say is their work, I found it very valuable, and a lot of people have. And I wish them the very best in whatever endeavors they go to next.
For sure.
Okay. You had one more article, I believe, Al. Is that correct? Or no, you've got two more.
I've got two more. I'll go pretty quickly over this from the Salt Lake Tribune, April 17th, 2022. Jeffrey S. Nelson writes in about that the LDS youth are leaving due to moral conscience issues. So those moral conscience issues, as you're seeing a lot of goodness, I've got to get my initialisms here straight. The LDS youth are leaving due to the way that the LGBTQ community is being treated by the church.
Yeah.
So that's what he's found, is that he's got a lot of kids that come to him and say, look, the church is just being mean to people that, all these people are doing is figuring out their own sexuality, and this is the way that they are. It's not that they're making a life choice to be this way. This is just the way nature has made them. And the church doesn't give them any safe harbor to figure that out. And all that they've seen the church do is try to get these people to, turn it off, shut it away. Don't bring it up. We don't want to hear about, your different flavors that you feel like you are. And that's really causing a lot of conscience or conscionable grief for these LDS youth. So a lot of them are leaving because they just want to live and let live. And, they've got friends, they've got some of them themselves. They've got family, they've got people around them that they're aware of what their sexual orientations are, and they're different from them, or they're the same as them, whatever the case may be. They don't see that as a reason to shut somebody out or try to hide them away. They see that as, well, this is just what makes us different. It's, just as natural as having someone that's a different color of skin. It's diversity that makes us interesting to each other. It's not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, it took me, honestly, Al, it took me a long time to get up to snuff on LGBTQ issues. I was very bigoted for many years, and I still struggle in some aspects of that. So, but the youth today are growing up in an environment where, hey, gay marriage is legal. There's no such thing as civil. There's no such thing as civil unions anymore. I mean, everything's all legal, and they realize the history that comes with having a double standard or things like that, and they don't want to tolerate it. So, you know, I'd like to. We would all like to see reformation on these issues, I guess.
Yeah.
That does goes directly into my next article. We only have 2 articles left to go, and that Mormon husband who came out, and this is from the Daily Mail. This is Mormon husband who came out as transgender woman at age 47 says that it strengthened the marriage to her wife, who stayed by her side despite the couple being cast out by their church because of the gender identity. And this was published on 21 April 2022. And what you have here is Alyssa Connor, age 50, from Utah, lived as Kevin Connor, a married Mormon man with 3 children. And for many years, he worked as a national sales director while he was at church, while he was at church or while he was at work. But then he would come home and he would live as a woman. So he lived a double life.
Yeah.
And I cannot imagine the strain and the stress that would go into try to live in a way that does not conform to who you really are.
Yeah.
I honestly cannot fathom it. I can kind of fathom being gay, just a little bit.
Okay.
It's very hard, but I can kind of conceive of it.
Sure.
Because I have an attraction to a woman, therefore I could think I could have an attraction to a man.
Yeah.
I can't fathom what this person has gone through. So this is an area in my life that I am very uneducated in. I am very ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to come across as bigoted. I need to be educated on this. And that's why I like this article. So it shows all the pictures of a very happy Mormon family with all the 3 kids. It shows a Mormon wedding, and it shows a very happy family. And then also after the transition, it shows her dressed, in high heels and in a dress with long hair and makeup and things along those lines.
Yeah.
Since she transitioned to becoming a woman, she has become subject to church discipline.
Yeah.
Now, in times past, they used to call that Al. They used to call that disfellowshipment.
Yeah.
You used to be am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right. Disfellowshipment, as then you were. They would put limits as to how much interaction you could have with your fellow members of the church in your ward.
Right. So, but now they've really clarified that. Even back in 2020, they've clarified the policy for transgender Latter-day Saints.
Mm-hmm.
From the church's very comprehensive handbook, which is basically the official policies for the church in almost anything. The handbook, the general handbook, says that gender is an essential characteristic of Heavenly Father's plan of happiness, and church leaders counsel against elective medical or surgical intervention for the purposes of attempting to transition to the opposite gender of a person's birth sex, aka sex reassignment. Leaders advise that taking these actions will be cause for church membership restrictions, which used to be called disfellowshipment.
Yeah.
The book also takes a stand against social transition. Now, the individual in this article has not gone through hormonal or any surgeries, but the handbook says that even changes in dress, grooming, names, or pronouns will that reflect a gender identity different from one assigned at birth, that will result in restrictions.
Yeah.
So if you're a Latter-day Saint and you just want people, if I as Steve Ace go to my bishop and say, hey, I just want to be called she from now on, I disfellowship.
Yes.
Just on that alone, just the pronoun.
Yep. Just from that alone would be enough to disfellowship a person, according to the General Handbook of Instruction.
Right. I think, and that also I think what the church does not want to see, I think, is that they don't want someone to be passing the sacrament and then a little old lady looks up and she's about to get the sacrament and it's somebody in a dress.
Yeah.
That for them is unacceptable. Whether that person has hormones, whether that person has surgery, no matter what the condition is, they don't want to see that.
Yeah. This article rings a little close to home for me. When when I was a teenager, I had a friend of mine that lived just down the street, and her dad stopped coming to church, kind of dropped off the face of the planet, it seemed. And then they had an aunt that started showing up. And it turns out that the aunt was their dad post surgery. He had made the transition. Boy, I mean, this whole article just reads like I was looking at her life again. That he would go to work and they'd come home, put on his wife's clothes, and he just felt more comfortable as a woman than as a man. And I didn't understand it at the time. Of course, as a teenager, just growing up in Utah County, and so I was of a mentality that was very bigoted. And I said some things to my friend that I really wish I hadn't back then, and I'm going to carry that regret for the rest of my life. But I really do wish her family. I wish her father, who is now her aunt, the best, and I do hope that the life is kind to him, or I'm sorry, kind to her going forward.
Well, that's very vulnerable of you to put out there. And I just want to bring up one more quote from this article, which see if I can find it here. This person, she went on an LDS mission.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get the quote at the bottom of the screen. Here it is. We were raised Mormon in the church. I even completed a mission in Japan for the church.
Mm-hmm.
But they decided that this wasn't a way of life that we could support. And I've told other members of the church, to not support it. It hurts because they cannot celebrate my achievements as they aren't able to support it. It's the position they've been put in by the church. So that's why it's been so difficult. So he doesn't, he said people are treating him as ungodly, even though it's not uncommon. So,
yeah,
no matter what you do, if you're transgender, you are, quote, subject to membership restrictions. Now, that is based upon your bishop and stake president. Now, some bishops and stake presidents could have a transgender person still performing some roles because it says that you are subject to church discipline.
Mm-hmm.
You can also write to the first presidency and say, hey, I'm transitioning, but I still want to be able to do certain things. And you can get approval for that. So if you're a woman who's transitioning to a man, you can write to the first presidency. I would say I want to have the priesthood. Now, I cannot tell you what percentage of people get that granted, but I'm going to go out on a limb here, Al, and tell you that the percentage is low.
I would assume that it's probably the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And same with a man transitioning to a woman.
Yeah.
Because what the church does not want to have is two people across from each other in a sealing ceremony in a temple, and they're both dressed in female or bridal gowns.
Yeah.
Regardless of what other policies have been in place. So it's just a very sad situation for these individuals. The article talks about how much pressure he was under, how he had to live a lie.
Yeah.
And just, heart just breaks on these things. These are very active and very faithful people who seem to be put in impossible situations.
Yeah.
Something that I cannot fathom going through myself. So I don't know what can be done, but it seems like something needs to be done.
The message that has been very clear from the church all throughout history has been that there are two genders. You either align with one or the other gender, and once you have aligned with them, it needs to correspond with your genitals that you've been given from nature, and beyond that, they make no accommodation. So for the LGBTQ community, the church seems to be very much not the place.
Yeah, if you look at the proclamation of the family, it says gender, I forget the exact verbiage, but gender is a part of our premortal, mortal, and postmortal identity. And that is basically gender is immutable.
Yeah.
In pre-existence, you are either a man or a woman. On earth, you're either a man or a woman. And in the next life, you will either be a man or a woman. And all three of those have to line up.
Yeah.
You weren't a woman in the pre-existence, a man now, and be a woman later. Whatever it is that you were in the pre-existence, that's where you are all the way. So it's a total, you're right. It's either one or the other. There is no gray area when it comes to gender. And unfortunately, from a scientific perspective, there does seem to be a gray area on some individuals.
Certainly. But the church, I mean, it's not just to be male or female. If you're male, you need to be a masculine male. If you're female, you need to be a feminine female. And
unfortunately, when you look at some of those old church quotes, you do hear the manly man.
You see that a lot, yeah.
You do, yeah. The stereotypes are out there. So, all right, I can't talk about this issue anymore. Let's go on to the last one.
Yeah, we had a rather significant death in Mormonism and also in the United States. The previous, senator from the state of Utah, who's the longest serving Republican senator, Orrin Hatch, he passed away April 23rd, 2022. Now there's a statement on LDS Newsroom. So this is, from the church. The church made their statement regarding the passing of Orrin Hatch. It's really quite sweet and touching that they really appreciate the service that he gave to this state, to his country, and to his church as well. So, they recognize him as being a very excellent senator. Now, there's a few years ago, there was the passing of Senator Harry Reid. Now that's where it gets interesting.
Now, Senator Reid, he was a Jack Mormon, or was he a dyed-in-the-wool Mormon?
He would have described himself as a dyed-in-the-wool Mormon.
Former state president.
Yeah, former state president. The guy, I mean, served in callings, and he was a Democrat majority leader in the Senate. But he was LDS. He was one of the most prominent LDS people serving in Washington on the national level, just the same as Orrin Hatch, maybe even more so than Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch wasn't a majority or a minority leader. He was significant. He served on a lot of committees. I don't want to downplay him by any means, but Senator Harry Reid, he was of the same level as Mitch McConnell is today. He was the leader of the Senate, the foremost member of the party in control of the Senate at the time.
He was basically a linchpin of the entire U.S. government.
Certainly. But and the church's statements regarding the two, they're pretty similar in length. They're both fairly short. You ought to go on and look at what the statements are. But for Harry Reid, they just thank him for his service in the church and for his service in the nation. But they don't really It's not really flowery. It's pretty stale, and very generic.
Yeah. So with Senator Hatch, who's your senator, right?
Yes, he was our senator until the last election, when he bowed out. He was in his 80s when he passed. But boy, this guy ran in the beginning back in the 70s on a platform of we need to get senators, or we need to get term limits put in place so that you don't have all these senators serving for 6 and 7 terms. And then he went on to serve, I think, for 8. I mean, goodness, the guy served for longer than anybody else. And at the very end, lobbied for term limits, but I never got them.
Yeah. So actually, when you think about powerful Mormons, the most powerful Mormons that have ever been around, you've got to put Harry Reid at darn near either the top or near the top.
I would put him above Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts, but a governor is the head of the executive branch for the state, not the head of the legislative branch for the nation.
Right. So when it comes to the pecking order of who takes the U.S. presidency, there's the president, then there's the vice president, then there's the Speaker of the House, and then there's the majority leader. So Harry Reid was 4th in line for
he was.
So now you could say who's more powerful, Brigham Young, the governor of a territory and then a state, or Harry Reid. And I think that I think Harry Reid would still be on top of that one.
Absolutely.
Now, I just want to read a little bit of each of these statements, and I got a last question, and we're going to wrap up. So, this is for Orrin Hatch's statement. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints joins with all those who are mourning the passing of Senator Hatch. Throughout his life, Senator Hatch served with distinction, particularly during the 42 years he represented the state of Utah in the United States Senate. Senator Hatch's tireless efforts on behalf of his country have benefited countless lives, and his strength in promoting religious freedom will be a blessing to all people of faith for generations to come. His service and callings he accepted in the church reflected his commitment to serve his fellow man. Senator Hatch leaves a commendable legacy to his family and to the nation. We express our love to Elaine and to their children and grandchildren and pray the Lord's blessings will be upon him. Okay, so there's Senator Hatch's statement from the church. Now let's listen to Senator Reid's statement from the church, which was back in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit shorter. On behalf of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we extend our condolences to the family of former Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. Senator Reid was a devoted and capable public servant who was dedicated to his family, his faith, and his country. We are grateful for his tireless service in each of these facets of his life well lived. We pray that Senator Reid's loved ones will be blessed and sustained at this tender time of parting and in the years ahead. I see a pretty big difference between those two statements, or am I imagining things?
No, you're very much accurate. Like I said, Orrin Hatch's is very flowery, very much the church supports you, the church loves you, the church sustains you. Harry Reid passed away, and we wish the best for his family, and our condolences we send. That's it.
But these are both true believing members. These are both dyed-in-the-wool Mormons who fought the Mormon fight, right?
Yeah.
Why could there possibly be a difference in between these two statements, Al?
I believe that it's purely political. I think that the church is very much run by right-wing, conservative Republicans, and there may be a Democrat sprinkled in here and there, but I think that it's kind of like the diversity amongst the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, where you have a few people of different colored skin, but the vast majority is white.
Yeah. So I find it very interesting that Senator Hatch gets a glowing send-off, but Senator Reid gets a very tepid send-off when Senator Reid was the more powerful among the two, and they were both equivalent. That basically tells me that the church values your political affiliation.
Certainly.
To a significant degree.
Yeah.
And
I don't see any other way to read that.
I don't see any way to read that. And also, remember, the church speaks for God.
Yeah.
So this is, at no time have I ever heard a statement that was put out by the church that said, hey, this is just men speaking as men. Mm-hmm. This isn't God speaking, so you can just take this as a man's opinion. But when the church gives a tacit or an explicit, in this case, endorsement of one's political affiliation, meaning that Republicans who do their jobs serve with distinction and are commendable and are will really be missed, and but Democrats who do the same job, we send our prayers to their loved ones. I think it sends a very the message that it sends seems to be, I don't know. I'm speechless. I'll just put it that way, which is not a good attribute for a podcast.
No, and if this church is going to be a worldwide global church, they need to be a global worldwide church and not just a church that is grateful to the local representative from the state of Utah. Harry Reid is a state away and just gets, well, thank you for your service. But Orrin Hatch, my goodness, just, we love you, we sustain you, may God receive you and all your posterity to the fourth generation. That's going a little flowery, but that's kind of the point. Is like, this is from the first presidency office. This is the top tier of the church saying this is where we stand on this, and it's wow, what a division. I don't know how you can read it any way other than, hey, if you want to be a beloved member of the church, you need to, have political affiliations that align with us.
Yeah, that's, Yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you're not voting for Mitt Romney, you're not voting for Senator Hatch.
Yeah.
Then, thanks for playing, but you could have done better.
Yeah.
You could, Harry Reid, thanks for all that you did, but we all know that you could have done a little more. And what you more could have done was to have been a Republican.
Yeah. that seems to be the message.
Which, in Nevada, trying to get a Republican in the Senate, I don't think is going to fly anyway. So,
no.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Al, did we leave anything else off, or have we covered all of the news that is worthy to ruminate about the great and spacious beehive?
I think we have covered it all here in the whole world of Mormondom. There was a lot this week. There was certainly a lot. I'm sorry we couldn't get to even more, but we've already gone probably 20 minutes beyond our time. So we're doing the best we can.
Hey, thanks a lot, Al. We thank you to all of our listeners and everybody. Tune in next week for some more Mormon News Roundup.
Great.
Hey everybody, it's D-Vase here. Thanks so much for listening to the Mormon News Roundup. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Allow me to explain. Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a being with no moral constraints. My number one goal is to hurt the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.